Hello and welcome back to Wave of Dawker. I look very disheveled right now. I just got up from a nap. More on that later. I'm just kidding. But this video is going to be the Letterboxd Lowdown. At least that's the working title of this series, where I'm going to go through what I've watched in the last month, over the past few weeks since January 31st. I've been trying to watch a movie every few days, every other day, every 3 days, whatever. Just because, I really haven't watched that many movies. I'm really more of a YouTube guy. I'm really more of an anime or manga guy. I love movies. I've seen a bunch of movies prior to this, but I wanted to watch more iconic ones and movies that I've been wanting to watch for a while, so that's what I've been doing. And I've been simultaneously reviewing them and going through the movies that I've watched on Letterboxd. So we're going to go through the movies I've watched, talk about them very briefly. And yeah, that's how this is going to go. So like and subscribe, and let's just get into the Letterboxd thingamajig right now. So, a movie I watched, I'm going to go through it on lowest rating to highest rating. You'll see that there are a lot of 5 stars. That's just because I like movies, and it takes a lot for me to dislike a movie. I haven't disliked any of the movies I've watched, but I've liked a lot of the movies a lot more than the other movies I've watched. So first up, A Ghost Story, starring Casey Affleck and Rooney Mara. This is distributed by A24. So A24, how fun. This movie was really weird. It's about Casey Affleck dies, so him and Rooney Mara are dating, and he dies in like a car accident. And at the hospital, you see like the sheet is over his head, and he comes up and he's a ghost, and then he starts following around Rooney Mara and just like seeing what she's been up to after he passes, and that's great. It's a really poignant way of telling the story of the afterlife. It was shot really interesting. It was shot in like a rounded square, almost like it was like an old timey kind of like disposable photo. And there's a lot of emphasis on really long shots. Like in the hospital, it's all from like pretty far back, like it's like the hospital bed. Like the framing is really good, the composition is really solid, but it holds in that shot for like 3 or 4 minutes, and there's another shot at their home where it's her in the foreground eating some pie and crying, and then you see the ghost in the background, and it held in that shot for like 6 or 7 minutes. So it had a really strong emphasis on really long shots. The composition was fantastic. It felt like almost like a really like it felt like a slideshow just because of how little dialogue there was and how much of an emphasis there was on those really long still shots of just people. All the blocking was really good. My biggest gripe with this film and why I put it as a 3 star was that I don't know it. The first 30 minutes was about Casey Affleck and Rooney Mara. It was about their characters and him dying and looking over her, and then new people move into the house, and then it has emphasis on those people, and then like the ghost starts haunting that family, and I was like, why are you doing this? I thought you were just in love with this lady. And then it cuts to a few years later after that, where like apparently like I guess like this like 30-year-old guy is living in this house, and then he's having like a party, and then this like dude with like a receding hairline starts talking about like human purpose and stuff like that. It's like what's going on? The ghost is still there. He's just hanging out. Cut to the house getting demolished. Cut to it's like a neo futuristic like neo tilted kind of kind of place, and the ghost like it just got really convoluted, and I feel like we started to stray away from the main purpose of the film being that you know love always waits, like blah blah blah, like you still have a purpose on this earth, and that was the point of it. And it cuts back, it gets back to that at the end. Obviously spoilers for all these films. I'm going to try to keep it relatively spoiler free. I'm going to talk about most of the films pretty in depth, but I think it just got further and further away from what made the first 30 minutes so great about. And then obviously, but towards the end it goes back to the relationship, because like it starts to cycle, and like when he jumps off the building, it goes back to like the 1800s and like where that house used to be, and it keeps going, like, and he keeps like seeing what's happening, like time is like very quick for this ghost. And then it gets back to when the house was built, when they move in, and then it goes back to talking about their relationship. But I feel like there's too much stuff that wasn't about their relationship in the movie that kind of made the rest of it kind of moot to me, because I'm just like, I don't care about these other people. I care about the relationship with these two characters, because that's with who the ghost is. Whatever. I gave it 3 stars. I would check it out if you haven't seen it. It is a good movie. I just felt, and I'm sure I was talking to a professor about this yesterday, and he feels the opposite, and he feels everyone that has seen it feels the opposite. Like I think I'm in the minority for this, but I just wasn't as attached to the rest of the film as I was to just exploring, because it felt like it was just like a commentary on grief almost, but then it just becomes like I'm a ghost and I'm haunting people. It was just really bizarre. I gave it 3 stars. Whatever. the next movie that was 3 stars. I watched Monty Python and the Holy Grail for the first time. All these are for the first time, by the way. I've heard about this film for a long time. I've heard of the comedy group. I've heard just a ton of things. My dad's a really big fan of these movies, and it was really funny. Really good practical effects, and I love practical effects. Obviously, this was made in the 70s, so that's kind of really all they had to use. I really liked the amount of, like, I don't know how to describe it, but just like the 2D, like when they transferred to like drawn versions of them, kind of like running away from the monster. Like I just like that how they had that balance of, like, obviously we can't animate or make this like massive monster in the cave that's gonna chase us around, so we're just gonna do a fun version of just like little things on toothpicks or popsicle sticks running around. I thought that was really fun. A fair bit of the whole movie, and you can see that in my review right here, was just how the documentary guy was like killed, and then like his wife's like, oh my gosh, and then she calls the police, and like it ends at the end the police coming in and arrest everybody. I thought that was just really funny, just a really funny running gag. But I mean, it was funny as advertised. I think my favorite bit was was it Lancelot, Sir Lancelot, the guy who got the arrow message that like hit his it hit his squire. He reads the message saying like, oh my gosh, I'm being married against my will, and he charges into the castle and like kills everybody. And it was a really cool shot because it was following him, like it was like a really shaky cam from the front and then following him from the back, just like slashing everybody. I thought that was really funny. It was really well shot, really good, really funny. I'll check it out if you haven't. But yeah, Monty Python and the Holy Grail. I gave it 3 stars just because there were some bits I just kind of felt went on for too long. Like the whole nights that just say new and then the nights that can't hear the word it. I just thought that kind of bit went on for too long. But it was really funny. And I didn't dislike it at all. It's just, comparatively. Next up, David Lynch's Dune. So, I watched this actually before I watched Villeneuve's Dune. Dune 2 coming out this weekend. Super excited for that. This movie was really, really weird. I knew little to nothing about the Dune universe as a whole. And starting it off with David Lynch's, I guess, is kind of a funny way of getting introduced to it. Because from what I've heard of other people talking about his adaptation of it, is that he kind of misses in a lot of things. Is my face cam in the way of the posters? I'm going to move my face cam. I'm going to move it like here. Yes. Back to Safari. But what I've heard is that he just kind of, and actually, I think actually my face cam's cut off now. Sorry, I keep going back and forth. What I've heard when people talk about this film is that he actually had a lot cut out of like his cut. Like he has like an additional like 3 or 4 hours. No, maybe it's not that much, but apparently he had a lot of what he wanted to do cut just because the studio didn't really like what his vision was. But apparently Lynch actually had a pretty true to Frank Herbert's version of Dune. It just got cut. And after watching Villeneuve's, which I'll talk about later, I felt that this movie was pretty close to the story. And the funniest thing that I think just occurred, like that, the funniest part about this movie, I think, is if you've seen Dune, when Jessica and Paul escape the Arrakis Temple after the Harkonnen raid, and they get to the Ornithopter and they kill those guys and whatever, and then they escape to the Fremen. In Lynch's version, so in Villeneuve's version, as soon as Paul and Jessica reach the Fremen, Paul kills that guy, and then the movie ends, and that's after 2.5 hours. In Lynch's, they reach the Fremen around like the hour 30 mark. This movie is like 2 hours and 15 minutes long, I think. They reach it around like the hour 30, hour 45 mark, and then the rest of the book occurs in that final 30 minutes. And that final 30 minutes is what Villeneuve is adapting in his 2 hour and 45-minute film in Dune Part 2, which I think is just really funny. Like, the pacing is like Paul and Jessica reach the Fremen, and then it's just boom, 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 boom. Like, the rest of the book happens, and it's like really quick, and then he doesn't really go in depth on anything. And I can imagine that that's where most of the cutting went. Like, I feel like a lot of the second half of the Dune book, which he adapted in 30 minutes, is what was left on the cutting room floor by the studio, which I think is interesting. I'd like to read more into this. But I really, really enjoyed this movie. I honestly prefer Kyle MacLachlan's Paul in some ways. I preferred how they announced Harkonnen. And it was just really funny to see the contrast in how Villeneuve and Lynch stylized each of like the races in the Dune universe. Like the Mentats in Lynch's have like red lips and big eyebrows. And I think actually in the book they have red lips because they drink some liquid that makes them have their future seeing abilities. But then in Villeneuve they just have like the black strip on their lip, and then the Harkonnens and Lynches are like they have like red hair, and like the Baron Harkonnen just has a bunch of boils on his face and looks really yucky. But then in Villeneuve's, obviously they're all bald and have like very pale skin. It was really cool to see the different adaptations of characters in this book. But I did enjoy this a lot. I might rewatch it after I either watch Dune Part 2 or after I read Dune Messiah. But this was a great film. I would check it out if you haven't. It does justice to a good amount of. Obviously, I haven't read the book, but I think it actually it's pretty good. And a lot of people hate on it, but it's a fun watch. Next up, the original Godzilla. I don't know why I decided to watch this. I guess just because I couldn't find Godzilla minus Jesus. I couldn't find. Oh my God, that's a big ad. I couldn't find Godzilla -1 anywhere, and I want to watch that. And if I can, whenever I find that movie, I want to watch it. But I was like, you know what? I'm gonna watch the original Godzilla. This movie was really, really cool. Yeah. And I didn't know this until after I watched the film because as I was watching it and watching Godzilla destroy, parts of Japan, I thought that it was like a miniature model or a puppet destroying models. But apparently it's a guy in a Godzilla suit destroying like smaller sized like practical models. And I was like, dude, that's the coolest thing ever. Because like, why don't we do that more? Because like, and obviously we don't need to do that anymore with practical effects. Like back in like the 70s and 80s, I'd like to see more films that use men in suits or women in suits to play those big, large monsters. Like I'm curious if like I can't think of any other classic kaiju films that would have to use this, but like obviously like and like I was just watching Empire Strikes Back this weekend, and like the Tauntauns were miniatures, like they're like miniature little like stop motion models. But I'm curious. I'd like to see more films where the big monster is played by a guy in a suit destroying miniatures. That's awesome. It's like you're a little kid, just like stomping on like sandcastles and stuff like that. I thought that was awesome. This movie was really fun. It was well shot, and I think it. My biggest gripe with this film, I think, is how they introduced Godzilla, because it kind of felt like anticlimactic. Because you hear him initially, you just hear like his roaring and hear his footsteps, and then his first appearance is like in the next day, and you just see like his head pop out. It's like, oh my god, it's a creature from the Jurassic era, and then he just walks away. But, like I think it would have been much better if his like first physical introduction was him destroying the city, because like that's like a big like there's actually like, oh my gosh, he's actually melting things and destroying things. But instead you see him just kind of looking silly in the daytime, not really destroying anything. And then he comes back and does damage. I just thought that was really funny. And the way they kill him being an oxygen destroyer, I think is hilarious. But I did really enjoy this movie. Check it out if you haven't. There are tons and tons of Godzilla movies. I got it on HBO Max and just in the world. Like there's so many that exist. And it's a fun character. So that's Godzilla. Next up into the 4 stars, The Burbs. I watched this in my video production class with Tom Hanks, Carrie Fisher. Who liked this? Oh, nice. What was I saying? The Burbs. So I watched this in my video production class. It has Bruce Dern, Carrie Fisher, Tom Hanks, and a bunch of other actors. It's about mild-mannered neighborhood. New neighbors move in. Everyone thinks that the new neighbors are like evil people. They investigate it. They like, and it's fun because, like I say, this generational amount of plot twists and subverted expectations. The way that the music works, the way that the editing works, the way that just the characters go about how they address these neighbors, it really does not give the audience like a clear way of knowing if these neighbors are bad or not. Like the first shot of the movie is Tom Hanks in the middle of the night going over to the neighbor and seeing like lightning out of their roof, seeing like a bunch of lights and loud noises coming from the basement, and that like sets in stone like, oh, these neighbors are bad people. But had that scene not been there, it would have just kind of set them up as just being regular people, and then the neighbors kind of do all the assumptions. So it was a really fun testament to how a film's editing and how like different scenes chopped together can make you think a certain thing. But it was really, really funny too. Like there are a lot of really funny scenes. I don't want to give anything away. I think you should just watch this wherever you can. It's on Netflix. I didn't know that. Wow. But it was really fun. I gave it 4 stars. It was fun seeing Carrie Fisher again play like a really level-headed like logical thinker. But yeah, it was cool. It was fun. There was a lot of just like really silly gags that they would do. Like it would be like kind of like a standard edited film, and then it kind of get like really dramatic out of nowhere, or it'd get like they did like one of those like they one of those scenes. I thought that was really funny. But yeah, The Burbs was really good. I liked it. I'll check it out if you haven't. Next up, Muppet Treasure Island. It's just the Muppets. It's the Muppets and Tim Curry retelling the story of Treasure Island. Really funny. A lot of good Muppet gags. I think my favorite gag in this was when they go to the island where the treasure is, and then it cuts to like the wild people there, like the Boom Shakalaka people or whatever, and then uh, the chef is there. I thought that was really funny, and like the whole thing was just like, how else do you think we were gonna include this guy? I thought that was just like a really funny gag. Like Muppets are just inherently funny, and I was thinking about this, and I was just like, I feel like the Muppets are one of the few like franchises, I guess, or just like it's like one of the few franchises where it's like you think of a movie, like think of like a very popular movie that came out, like I don't know, like the Batman 2022, like Spider Verse or whatever, all those movies, like Inception, like all these big blockbusters. All of these movies would work, like the screenplay could work as a story, and you could read the screenplay, you could read the screenplay as a book, you could read it, and it would make like the story would flow well and it would make sense because like it's a story, it flows well. And while Muppet Treasure Island is like adapting a book, and I'm just talking about all and like in general, I don't think Muppet movies, if you were to read their screenplays as like a book, and like if you were to turn them into a book, I don't think they would work as well because the physical humor of Muppets is so essential to why these movies are great that if you don't have that prevalent in like the book of like this that you're reading, it just wouldn't work. That's a really convoluted thing to say. Like I'm just like kind of like it's just a random thought, but I'm just like the physical humor of Muppets is so essential, and obviously that like it's like obvious, like duh, like they're Muppets, like that's like their whole thing. But it's like just like a really funny thought. And if you haven't seen like the newest Muppet movie and like Muppet Most Wanted, please watch it. Those movies are hilarious. But Muppet Treasure Island was great. It's a Muppet movie. It was funny. It was good. There was like a character who was like Tom, and then like almost dead Tom, and then dead Tom. I thought that was just like a really funny bit. And I would just crack up at just seeing Muppets doing background character stuff. Great movie. Muppets are awesome. Next movie, The Notebook. Uh, yeah, this movie is exactly what I didn't need to see right now. That's me being dramatic, blah blah baby. But The Notebook was good. It was a really good love story, and I think I'm not sure if I'm the minority with this take, but I think honestly I could have done without the cutbacks to the older versions of them and like the whole like Alzheimer's or dementia plotline. Like I didn't really need that. It didn't add anything to the story for me, and I could have done with an additional 30 minutes of whatever these characters like Noah and whatever these characters are called. I could have done with another 30 minutes of just telling their story when they were kids instead of stupid old people. Fuck old people. Oh, yeah, I shouldn't say that. I just didn't need that plot line. It didn't really add anything to the movie for me. But the baseline, the story of their love, I thought was really beautiful, and it was just a fun movie. I liked it. I could see why people like it so much. I didn't cry as much as I thought because I've heard this movie is a big cry movie. But yeah, I mean it was fun. Notebook's a good movie. Blah blah blah. Ryan Gosling's awesome. Rich McAdams awesome. And yeah, that's all I gotta say. The Notebook. Yeah, I don't need the old people. Next up, Uncut Gems. This movie, jeez, this ad. This movie's awesome. No, I won't say it's awesome. This movie's stressful. That's what I'll say. I was stressed out this entire movie. I knew that it was stressful going into it. That's what I've heard. That's like the one thing that I've heard about this movie is that it's just super stressful. Uh, and directed by the Safdie brothers, and another film directed by the Safdie brothers, Good Time with Robert Pattinson. I love that movie, and this movie has a very similar feel to that, where it's like it's just constant like adrenaline. Like it's just like the way that it's edited, the way that it's like the score, the way just the way that the main character acts. Like Adam Sandler plays like a total just like the grossest dude you'll ever meet. I just kept like my stomach kept like churning just thinking about this guy. Like his life was just terrible. I did not want to be this guy, and it was just oh my god. I was just like bleh, just sick the entire time just watching this. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. He was just doing everything he was doing was just wrong, and it was so ridiculous. It was fun. Lakeith Stanfield's in it. I love him. Funny seeing Kevin Garnett in this too, and it felt real too. Well, I mean, obviously this isn't based on a true story, but it just felt like it could have been based on a true story. Just the way the Safdie brothers kind of blurred the lines between what's real and what's fake. I knew how it ended going into it, so I wasn't really surprised by that, but it was just very sudden. I was just like, damn, like, okay. And, yeah, I mean, it's just hella stressful, and I just was just like, ugh, like the whole time. But it's a fun watch. I would watch it if you haven't. Uncut Gems. Into the 5 stars. So, I'm gonna go, no, I'm not. Fargo. I watched this yesterday. And I'd heard good things about this movie. I've watched of the Coen Brothers stuff. I've watched No Country for Old Men, and that movie is fantastic. That's one of the best movies ever. And this movie is also fantastic. Um, I don't want to get like too many spoilers or anything, but Marge, the police lady in this film, she's incredible. I just love like the narrative. I don't know if it's narrative contrast, but just like the back and forth of just like, oh Margie, like her and Norm and they're like going into their relationship, and then she's going into work, and then like the contrast between her and Norm, and then her and then what's his name, the dad and Gene, what like the shitty dad, the car salesman, like the contrast between their relationship and and it was really interesting that at the end of the film, and I could spoil anything, but after everything had happened, you still walk out of that like watching that being like that dad is still the worst guy ever. Like I just and this is I'm not gonna spoil this, but why this is like in like this film's description. But what motivated this guy to be like, I'm gonna hire people to kidnap my wife to extort money out of my father-in-law because my father-in-law won't give me money. But the dad like openly like says, or Wade like openly says like, oh yeah, Gene and Scotty don't have to worry about money ever. So it's like, just be content in the fact that sure, you might not be the breadwinner in the household, but it's like you're gonna be well off. You live in a nice house. Like they showed no reason for this guy to they gave no reason as to why this guy's like struggling financially. And they never showed him being like, I don't know, like having like a small lunch. Like he lives in a nice house. His father-in-law is constantly over. His son. Blah 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 blah. Like they gave like no reason as to why this guy would do this. He just kind of did it. I think that's probably the point. But I was just like, why are you doing this? Like that just all went to shit. Steve Buscemi plays like a dirtball in this. Um, it was just great. I really enjoyed it. And yeah, I feel like that's probably the most used phrase in this. It was great. I really enjoyed it. Whatever. Next up, Doctor Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. Kubrick film, 1964, war drama comedy. Um, this movie's awesome. I knew little to nothing about this film whilst I was watching it, or before watching it. But man, this movie is incredible. It is it's like such a straight balance between like almost like commentary on war, and then also like just like a great comedy. And it wasn't like a laugh out loud like cracking up comedy, but it was just kind of like I was just like I was like chuckling like frequently just because of all like the little bits. Like there's like a whole bit where General Ravage's assistant, Mandem I think his name is, he was in the phone booth trying to call the president, and then like the soldier outside the booth, he was like, hey, like Mandem told him like, hey, like shoot that Coke machine, there might be some coins in there for the phone booth. And the guy was like, I can't shoot the vending machine, we don't pay for that. He's like, you realize that I'm calling the president right now about a nuclear bomb? He says, well, when I shoot this, you're gonna have to talk to the Coca-Cola company. I thought that was just there's just so many different like little bits. I thought General Turgston, whatever his name was, he was probably the funniest guy. Always chewing gum. He was like yapping, and then falling backwards, fell on his butt. I just thought this movie was just really funny. I liked all the plane scenes. There was a lot of Kubrick's like snap cuts. I thought that was just a really fun touch. This movie is just fun. It's an hour and a half, just like an easy watch. Oh yeah, I would check it out if you haven't. Next up, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. This is probably top 2, top 3 of the films that I've watched so far. This movie is fantastic. It's like 2.5 hours of just it's just a fun ride. And I learned after the fact that this is actually this movie is working parallel to the Manson murders, Charles Manson. I knew little to nothing about those murders. My dad told me like, you didn't know that this is based on the Manson murders, and after knowing that, it didn't really add or subtract anything to the film. I'm just like, okay, that gives me like a little bit more to think about. But it's like, meh, I don't really need to know that. But because apparently like Sharon Tate is the one that gets killed first in like that string of murders, and like, oh my gosh, Cliff and Rick, they don't exist, but Sharon Tate is obviously a real character. But this movie is just super fun. Brad Pitt plays a cool guy, and DiCaprio. This might be my favorite of the roles that I've watched him in. I've seen him in Killers of the Flower Moon and Inception. This is probably my favorite role from him so far, just because he just plays like this like, aging actor, and he's just like a hyper emotional guy. Like the whole scene, he's like, I gotta do goddamn Italian movies. That's damn proud. He starts like weeping. I thought it was really funny. his scene in the trailer is great, where he's like, mad at himself for messing up the lines. His relationship with Trudy, whatever, like the little girl on the set was cool. His relationship with Cliff was great. Like this movie's just fun. Like there's no stakes really. Like you get to the end and like the whole climax of the film, and like you kind of feel like, ooh, what's gonna happen? And then Brad Pitt does Brad Pitt stuff, and it's awesome. But check this out if you haven't. This movie's just super super fun. Uh, I love it. I love this movie. Next up, Inception. This is also probably top three or four, two or three of the films that I've watched. I obviously have a very uh, intense review of it. This movie's just so like I can't even fathom like the writers' room or like it's probably just Chris Nolan just like at home being like, what if there was a way we could tell a story about dreams and you could implant an idea in someone's brain? What if you could do that? And he did that. Really great ensemble cast. I thought Cillian Murphy's character was great. That whole scene with him and his father at the end was really emotional. Made me tear up a little bit. The movie's just really smart. The score was great, and I loved. There was a few times where there's like the classic Chris Nolan montage where it's these constant cuts of people doing work, and then it has like the intense. I think does Zimmer do this score? I don't know, but it has like that intense score. Tom Hardy was great in this. Like this movie's just fun. It's super cool. There was like a lot of unnecessarily intense cuts where it kind of like puts this idea in your head where it's like, oh, we're in crunch time now, but then it does it even more. Like the constant cutbacks to the van I felt was unnecessary because like I guess like Nolan felt like he had to be like, all right, look, this van is still falling, so they still have time before it hits the water, and they're all brought out of the dream. I feel like he did it too much to the point where it's just like if you're like looking at your watch, you're kind of like, I feel like it would have fallen by now. Like he kind of like planted this idea in your head. It's like, oh, we gotta go, but then it's also just like it's still falling. Don't worry. I don't know. Like it kind of like it was weird. And the scene when Murphy's character gets shot in the back by Maul, and like he didn't die, and they were able to revive him. I thought that was a little bit of a cop out. But overall, it was a really cool message about. I don't know if it's a message, but just about how love kind of leaves like an impact on you, and it's kind of hard to cut these people out of your lives or whatever out of your head. I don't even know if that's the message, but it was just really interesting, and Kevin's character was great. I thought Tom Hardy's character was awesome. This movie's just really smart and just really intense. And it's really rewarding to watch a film about a very complex idea and understanding it completely almost towards the end. And that's why I wanted to rewatch Tenet, because I watched it initially and I kind of was confused and fell asleep. But I want to rewatch it and try to get it just because I like Pattinson, I like John David Washington. Is that his name? And I like Chris Nolan. But Inception, fantastic. Obviously, hell is one of the best films of all time. So if you haven't watched it, watch it. Next up, Villeneuve's Dune. So yeah, blah 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 blah. I watched Lynch. Has already talked about this a lot, but this movie was just a really, like a much better and more drawn out version of Frank Herbert's book, like the first half of it. Cinematography was fantastic. Sound design was great. The score was intense. Like it was just like it felt primal, but also felt like futuristic. And it just makes me so excited for the second one, just because of how well the story was told, how great like all the set pieces were, how great like the CGI was. Like it just felt, I don't know, it just felt like a very tangible and fantastic sci-fi blockbuster. But this movie is just super cool. I already talked a lot about the Dune universe prior in my Lynch talk about David Lynch's, but I mean, it's just awesome, and he goes a lot more in depth on Kaleidos. Is that what it's called? That's not right. Caladan. Yep, Caladan. Goes more in depth on that. I enjoyed Oscar Isaac's Leto more than the other guys. A lot of the performance in this were a lot better than Lynch's, but this, I mean, it was just so well casted. It's just such a great movie. I'm just so excited for Dune Part 2. I don't want to talk about this anymore. Dune's just great, and I'm so glad that I'm getting into it after so long, because I'd heard about it for a while and I'd never really tapped in. But dude, it is fantastic. I even got my dad to watch it, and he was kind of someone that was like, Dune's just boring Star Wars, but I got him to watch it, and he was asking me about Dune Part 2, so that's the power of films, people. Full Metal Jacket, another Kubrick. This movie's crazy. So going into this, I thought that it was just about, because like from what I knew, it was like, oh, Vietnam, training camp or whatever. You have like the classic scene of the boot camp general. You have Private Pile played by Vince D'Onofrio. Like I thought that was the entire movie. But that whole premise of like the camp ends like an hour in, and then there's an hour and a half of them actually in Vietnam. So I was like, damn, like the whole like Private Pile build up and that story that ends an hour in, and then it cuts to following Joker around. This movie was just, I wouldn't say it was harrowing, but it was just a very like whoof, like look at how the Americans and their existence, like their how they went about the Vietnam War. It's just like damn, like it's just like oh my god, like so many of the scenes and how they treated the Vietnamese people and just how they spoke of it was just like okay, woof, it's just intense. Um, yeah, this movie is just fantastic. I'm probably just like I enjoyed the Vietnam bit. I just think that whole training camp bit with the whole arc that Private Pile took was just crazy, and obviously like the climax of it was just like damn intense. But yeah, this movie was just really great. It's on HBO Max. You should watch it. And then finally, probably my favorite movie that I've watched thus far, and I did watch it in January, but I'm gonna call this the February wrap up, whatever. 2001: A Space Odyssey. This movie is freaking incredible. This movie is just ridiculous, and it's such a great testament to how important and how impactful sound design can be in a film. Like there was so little dialogue. I mean, you can see me say that here, but it's just it really just it gives you a feel of like what being in space is like. Like there were stretches where it would be like Frank in the main shuttle, and then Dave was going out to fix the thing, and it would just be 15 minutes of Dave just like his breathing in the suit, and just like different like clicks and clacks of Frank in the shuttle, just like beep, 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 just like it was just such like a I wouldn't say it was like emotionally intense, but it was just kind of just like it was very tense the whole film. HAL 3000 or HAL 9000, um, really interesting antagonist. The ending was just super like trippy, just like with Dave going through like that, like going through the monolith and like seeing all the lights in his face, and he was in like that like futuristic room and everything. Like this movie is just absolutely fantastic. So well shot. There's so many like the practical effects were incredible. All the miniatures. It's just it's just a perfect movie. And that's all the movies I watched this past month. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm gonna call this like Letterboxd lowdown. I think I said I was gonna call it. Yeah, just kind of me rambling as I tend to do about stuff that I like. But you know what? That's what the channel's about. It's just me talking about stuff that I like. So get over it. That's all I got for this video. Let me know what movies you watched this month. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.